Okay, I will begin. So in terms of introduction then, my name's Stephen Jones. For those who've read the bio, you probably already know this, but I work for a company called Sellafield Ltd. I'm currently an IT project manager. Within Sellafield, I was at one point I was the deputy head of project management, and I've also been a member of the APM board, and I am a former chairman of the PMC SIG. And I've been involved in a number of publications within the SIG, and I've also led a joint publication, probably a couple of years ago now, between the ACOST and APM on estimating. Okay, so a little bit about Sellafield. So just put it into context, so Sellafield is one of the biggest construction sites in the UK. We have over 10,000 employees. We've got 200 graduates and apprentices, and there's over 1,000 nuclear facilities on site. So we're one of the biggest construction sites in Europe. We've got a very diverse portfolio in terms of nuclear sites go, and we've been reprocessing at Sellafield for over 50 years. We're now moving into a decommissioning phase, and to do this, we do need a lot of IT and IT support. So I work for an organisation which is known as ISO, which is the Information Systems Organisation. So I'm here today to share some of my experiences in data analytics and the implementation of a project called PPM tools. So we've heard quite a lot today and more later about how to use the data. So I thought it might be a good idea to do something slightly different and look at how this data is obtained. Miller, earlier on from Network Rail, expressed that that there is a challenge in obtaining this data, and their implementation focused on a Power BI solution, which is great. Everyone wants more and more data, and I actually saw this in another presentation. I've actually stolen it, where it shows the GPS trackers on the backs of rugby players, and this is so they can collect and analyse the data during the match, and then they'll analyse it later about who was stood where, etc., etc. So all this data enables us to collect lots of information. And just to give you an example of how useful this information is, I did actually move house recently, and I actually got a letter from my car insurance company to my new address saying they'd like some clarification information as they believed I'd now moved address, and I hadn't told them. So obviously in the background, all these data points were getting connected, and it was enabling things like insurance companies to connect the dots and realize that I actually moved house before I even told them. And this was like the same week as I moved. I was really surprised. So again, we can use this use data on projects to join the dots and get a lot better picture of what's happening in terms of the program portfolios and projects within our organizations. So you might be thinking, well, what is a PPM tool? Okay, so PPM tool, the actual acronym stands for Project Portfolio Management. Now, these systems are usually in the cloud, but they can be on-premise, and they're used to manage portfolios, programs, and projects. They also enable collaborative working. They do have options where you can manage and store documents and create templates as well. If you look at the typical architecture of a PPM tool, and this one is taken from Planview, which is one of the leading PPM tools, and it was actually the option we selected. You can see there's lots of different modules and options available in terms of how these fit together. So you've got things in there like outcomes, strategic planning, demand, execution, governance. The one we're obviously interested in is the top one, which is the analytics and reporting. But you need all the other stuff as well to collect the data, especially the project information, the planning, the scheduling, the execution, tracking, the closure. So all the ones I've kind of highlighted are the ones which are also important, because they're the ones that are actually giving you the data. The analytics is just displaying the data, but that's the bit we're interested in.
So why did we need one in ISO? Okay, so currently Sellafield does use P6, SAP, Prism for its major projects, but within ISO we tend to have a lot smaller tasks and projects. So it might be that we have a task whereby you have to procure a new video conferencing system or something like that. So they tend to be smaller projects, a lot quicker turnover, rather than the major projects which you've probably seen on the news, where there's multi-million-pound projects spanning tens of years in terms of the duration. So what we needed was some way of managing the smaller projects. And you might say, well, why don't you use P6 and Prism and SAP? Well, the systems wasn't really configured to do that, and often all the tasks within ISO would just appear as one bar on P6, and it would be managed at that level, because in terms of compared to all the other projects, it was relatively small. It's still significant, we are talking hundreds of millions of pounds in total, but relatively small compared to like the £2 billion a year that we currently have as our project portfolio. So there was lots of information as well which wasn't kept in SAP or P6. For example, who was the project manager? Often it was quite difficult to interrogate these systems to say, well, who's actually the project manager on that system, on that project? And the project manager knew and the line manager knew, but generally nobody else did. Also, when it comes to monthly reporting, within the business, we were using Power BI and ClickView, but again, this was tended to be limited to the major projects. And the amount of reporting we was actually doing on ISO, because we have a large number of small projects, and when it comes to period end, it was taking several people several days per month. So they wanted some way of automating this system. And also senior management within ISO would be asking for certain ad hoc reports. And again, they could take a few days to actually get the information we wanted. So it was necessary really to implement some sort of PPM tool that could be interrogated and would allow us to maintain our portfolio of projects. And typically, as we saw in early presentations, that the default position was often, if you can't use these bigger systems, people tend to use Excel and PowerPoint, and that causes all sorts of challenges within the organization. So we decided to look at the market, and this was around about 2 years ago. Some of these systems and companies have since merged and the names have changed, but most of them are still around today. And we looked at 14 different options. In the end, it was kind of a two-horse race between Planview and Accolade, which is produced by Sophion. And Planview, the actual system called Enterprise One. In terms of the scoring, we had some criteria. These are not actual the data. Obviously, that's commercially sensitive. It wouldn't be fair on the individual companies. So this is just a made-up sample. But what we had some criteria, some requirements, and then we measured each of those organisations against those requirements in terms of the supplier profile, the deliverables, etc. And this allowed us to actually make our selection. It was quite involved. It wasn't. We did send out what they call them, questionnaires, and we actually invited the companies to do demonstrations as well to prove that they could meet the claims. And as I said earlier, eventually it was Planview who won, but to be fair, it was a close contest. Okay. So some of the challenges we faced is in terms of implementing a PPM tool is, people want more and more data, and what they actually want is information, which is slightly different to data. And they often know what they want, but sometimes rather than telling you what they want, they tell you what they don't want. So that was often a challenge. So it was only when you actually showed them some of the output in terms of, well, these are the reports that are available, that they begin to understand that, what the system was capable of. So it was a journey we had to take people on. There was also a bit of a resistance to change, as there is in any project. So there was the reports they currently had they'd the team who was going to run the system, they'd lovingly created these reports, often in Excel and PowerPoint, and they wanted the new system for these reports to look almost identical to the ones they were used to using. It's also required a large number of people to be trained to use the system, where previously we just had 3 or 4 users in terms of maintaining the spreadsheets and the systems they had. All of a sudden now you need, there was in the pilot, in the initial phase, we had 80 users. So these people had to be trained in using the new system. A lot of them didn't see the benefit to them. They were still doing the day job. They were still managing tasks and minor projects. And now was asking them to do something on top of the day job in order to be able to collect the data. The people who was going to be the systems owner, they didn't want to run 2 systems in parallel because they saw it as duplicating their effort. However, at the same time, they didn't want to switch off the old system until they had confidence in the new system. So there was lots of challenges. Also, history was really precious to them. They wanted to know exactly what happened this time last year because the way they'd set up the spreadsheets, they could actually do that. And the thing about a lot of these PPM tools, they tend to be live information and they don't really care about history. So once something's progressed, it's progressed. It's very often difficult to see, well, what was the progress 3 months ago? They don't tend to do that. So again, we had a bit of a problem in terms of capturing all the historical projects which had been started and completed. So we did actually draw a line in the sand and say, right, anything which was completed before April 2019 isn't going on the system. Okay, that didn't go down very well, to be honest, because in order to put a project on the system, you open a new project and it starts to run as a project from that moment in time. You can't really, but we did find ways of actually getting the historical data into the system, but it wasn't as clean as you would have liked. So, and the other challenge we had, it was very difficult to get users to move away from Excel, because Excel is really flexible. It's quite user friendly, and you can do things on it quite quickly. A lot of the reports that these systems, well, especially Planview, came out of the box, and they were world-class reports. They're a good start, but often you found they wouldn't meet exactly the specific requirements of what the users wanted. So what we found is some of the reports we had to have modified. This again caused problems because even though you could edit the reports, some of them were created in Power BI, and you can actually have Power BI reports within Planview itself, which is great. But you do need, a level of knowledge, and we did need experts to help us actually configure the reports. Some of the other reports which are in the system, even though the administrator could edit them, when there was system upgrades, and they tended to do these quite frequently every month, then you was in danger of losing some of the edits you did. So that we had all sorts of challenges in terms of implementing the system itself. We also had some organization changes. Okay, so we had to map out a lot of our processes and try to adapt those, and also incorporate the fact that we had this new system within those processes. This made us change some of the life cycles we had. Before we had the Sellafield gated process, it's called, which it's kind of a one-size-fits-all process. So therefore, it was necessary to put some additional steps in, especially at the front end. One of the things we had to do in part of that was obviously identify who the project manager was. And this system was being used for both projects, tasks, and also studies. So we could no longer call people project managers. We had to come up with another name. So we actually called them delivery managers, and delivery managers covered task managers, which are like small projects, project managers, and the BAs. So there were some organizational changes. There wasn't great organizational change, because we did have processes in place, but we did have to map them out and
decide where we're going to slot the changes in where required. One of the things that helped quite a lot, and it was probably one of the influencing factors in picking Planview, was the Customer Success Centre. So this is a website, and it's basically got lots of online training, videos, tutorials, and in terms of the access to it, it's free as long as you've got a Sellafield account, and anybody with a Sellafield email address could actually register and use it. So that was really good. The help on it was really good. So it helped quite a lot in terms of bringing people up to speed. In terms of the training, what we had is a train the trainer type approach. So there was a small team of us actually got trained by Planview in using the system. Typically these were kind of the team leaders, so you had the leaders for the BAs, the tasks, and the PMs who were actually trained, and then they then disseminated that training down through the line management into the direct reports. In terms of the system itself and the reporting and analytics, one thing that was quite nice is, typically we would have, 300 or 400 tasks at any one time, quite a few projects at any one time as well. Not quite that many, but what it did is help you could create what was called dynamic portfolios. So rather than seeing absolutely everything, you could filter on particular portfolios, and you could give different users access to those portfolios. So if I created a portfolio that was made up of just project managers, for example, and didn't include tasks or studies, and I could actually share that with other users. So the dynamic portfolios were quite good. The other thing, when you access the system, across the top, it had what they call tiles in terms of user interface. And this is just an example, which I've done a screenshot actually from the Planview website. And you can see there in this example that the 261 says straight away that this is quite a large portfolio, and they've actually called it the Star Trek portfolio. So you can give the portfolios names. So this has actually got 261 different tasks or projects within that particular portfolio. As a user, you can also edit this menu, so you can put your favorite tasks or reports on the menu, and you can actually view it in different ways as well. And as you can see, that there's lots of options. So as I said, when it comes to training people, it was actually something quite new, and even though the system is intuitive, you still have to be trained really how to use it. I was going to do a live demonstration, however, time is limited. There's not really time to do that. And what I found is, even though the sandbox area, which we use for all the testing, even though all the data is made up, it did contain real names of people. So what I've done, just to give you a flavour of what it looks like, I've actually done some screenshots and redacted them. So apologies for that. Okay, so this is what we call a column set view. Now you can see here that I've actually picked all of ISO. This is test data, but it's not it's not unusual for to have 675 projects live at any one time. Like I say, I have redacted it because some of the names are actually proper names of people. These are quite useful because you can select, similarly, if anybody's used Microsoft Project or anything like that, you can actually select which columns that you're going to view the data. So if there's particular things you're interested in, you can create your own portfolios. You can see here that we've got a portfolio called Portfolio Work Attributes. Okay, and we've got things like the type of work, is it a task, a study, or a project? And we had other types of things we used to do called internal development, which is also another type of work. And then similar to Excel, you can actually filter and sort on the different columns, as you would in Excel, and you can see that at the top you've got some tiles that you can set up as favorite tiles. Like I said, these are configurable. You can create your own. There's a massive list of different options for what you can actually select, and you can create your own reports from those options. And
these reports are designed so that you interact with them and you can drill down and you can look at, you know, the information behind the reports as well. So one of the big benefits was the fact that we could actually put schedules against some of the tasks. All the projects had schedules, but they were schedules in P6. But when we come down to the tasks and the minor projects, often, like I said, they were just represented as one bar. There is a high-level overview, so you can see all projects and tasks as those bars, and you can see here straight away. And again, this is test data; it's not real data. We don't have so many projects which are behind schedule, but you can see the progress of each of the projects quite easily compared to the baseline. You can see where we're up to at a particular point in time as well. So you can actually get an overview for your entire portfolio. And like I said, you can create your own portfolios, okay? And you can create which are specific to you. And they might be related to a particular program or even, you know, a particular project manager. And then you can actually interrogate and see what these are. And you can, these three dots at the beginning, this opens up another menu, and within that menu you can then drill down. So what you might want to do is see the detailed schedule beneath these projects and tasks. And you could do that. And again, I've just done another screenshot of a typical, and this is actually a template. So what you can also do is set up templates. So when you create a new task, you don't have to start by putting all the activities in. It will create a template then that the task manager can actually edit. And this was a kind of a massive benefit now, because previous to having this system, what we found is because the task managers couldn't put detailed schedules in P6 because they didn't have the access, they used to use Microsoft Project or Excel, and what we ended up with was lots of Microsoft Project files scattered all over the shared drive. Okay, what this enabled us to do now is bring them all into one place. So you actually had all your schedules in one place, and you interacted with the schedules very similar to you would Microsoft Project. There was even an interface to Microsoft Project that you can download off the internet, kind of an add-in for Microsoft Project, which then brought the data out of Planview. You could edit it, and then you could put it back in again. So it interacted with Microsoft Project quite well. But this was quite a big benefit, because now we had all the schedules in one place, and as long as the task manager updated these on a regular basis, then you had real live information in terms of what was happening in your tasks and your projects, which is really good. The templates as well, it wasn't limited to one, so you could have like t-shirt sizes. So you could say like, this is a big task, this is a little task, and what that would do is change the default durations automatically. So it was quite quick to actually create a new task and put a schedule to it. It's also used earn value. So these were, this is again just a made-up report, but you can see that you've got an earn value report, and you could do this by project, and you can drill down. You can see, in particular months, and you can even drill down to weeks, as long as the data's there. Obviously, you have to put the data in weeks to get it back out, and you've got all your typical earn value, BCWS, BCWP, ACWP, EAC, etc. With your, and obviously you've got the SPIs and the CPIs and everything else. So this was now giving us a single source of the truth. One of the challenges we had was getting this information for the projects in here as well. And what we needed to do was create an interface to Planview to our core systems, so SAP and P6. Fortunately, what we found is this interface or this information was already available because the project controls department actually had a cloud where they kept all this information already. So we didn't actually have to interface with each of the systems individually. We just had one interface to this cloud-based storage system that project controls already had for the major projects, and that was quite easy then to bring in the information required for the other projects. which weren't being managed in Planview, but we could still, display them as part of Planview. So these were the life cycle steps I talked about earlier. Again, we could create other life cycle steps if we needed to. But what we needed to do was map out our processes and create those as life cycle steps. There was lots of other life cycle steps in the background, which Planview did for its own management as well. But this was typically a typical just life cycle in terms of the different steps you needed to go to. And you can see this is just test data. In terms of the reporting itself, like I said, there was lots of reporting available. There was about 120 reports out the box, and each of those reports could then be configured, and there was drop-down lists. So the use case for the reporting is to use it live. Previous to that, we had pre-prepared packs for the departmental meetings. And to be fair, and I'll be honest, it is quite difficult to get people to move away from those pre-prepared packs to actually use the system and have it, in the meeting, projected on a screen, and you're actually drilling down. We're not there yet, I'll be honest. But it does allow people who get on with the system and are kind of adopters of the system to to actually come pre-prepared to those meetings, having got the pack in advance. They can actually drill down and they can come up with some quite pointed questions that they want to ask during the actual meeting itself. Okay, and like I said, at corporate level, they are using, for major projects, they are using Power BI and ClickView in meetings, so they do interact with those systems, as well. This was just more our local meetings within ISO, not really within Sellafield. So earned value reporting, again, you can do it by portfolio rather than just by project. And in terms of getting the data from Planview into other systems, what we could do, if we wanted to use Power BI or even Excel, but we tried to discourage people from using Excel just because, they would just fall back into using the way they used it previously. So it is possible to create things like OLA data cubes, a data mart, which you can then use either Planview to interrogate and Power BI, or you can use ClickView or Excel or anything else. So there's a number of data sets that allows you to create other models that you could use then to create your own, ad hoc reports. If there's something you was particularly interested in, then you could actually create that report. That said, now I know Millard did an excellent presentation earlier, and I was really impressed with some of the charts they actually produced using Power BI. But just to give it some sort of reality, I actually had a go myself, okay? And all I wanted to do was draw a graph of the number of tasks per month. Now, in the system, you don't have a table what says number of tasks per month. Because the system's live, someone creates a new task, they assign a project manager, and obviously you've now got a table of a list of tasks with start dates and project managers. All I wanted to do was say, well, how many tasks per month do we have on a cumulative basis? Okay, again, this is test data. This is not real data. And just draw a graph. I was shocked at how difficult it was. I have a background of SQL programming. Power BI does not use SQL. I didn't know that at the time. It uses another language called DAX. And this simple graph took several hours, so there's quite a steep learning curve, not having used DAX before. And in the presentation earlier where they were showing you Power BI, then they was talking about measures. Yes, you do need to create measures in order to be able to access the data. What they didn't tell you is that actually means writing some code. Okay, which I appreciated at the time, but because it wasn't SQL and it was this new language called DAX, I actually had quite a a steep learning curve. Once you've got the data on the screen, I must admit, it's really easy then. And what's not shown on this chart, because I did a screenshot of it, it's really easy to set up filters and drill down into the information. So if you was to click on any of those dots, you can then drill down and have all the screens showing you know, the data that's actually producing those. So if you wanted to see what those tasks were, it's quite easy then to drill down. But the takeaway from this is, if you are going to, you know, create reports in Power BI, then you need to employ someone who's got some expertise. Yes, the contractor will do it for you, and if you can write a specification for what report you want, they will create that for you. However, there is a cost associated with this. So I know it doesn't look very impressive, that chart, but it was quite challenging for a new user to actually set that up. I have seen some quite impressive Power BI demonstrations using, you know, our system. What one of the contractors wrote, this is the type of thing you can do. Obviously, he'd written that as an example that he gives to all his clients, but again, this was just to put it into context of it is a lot more difficult than it looks. So in terms of cost then, because obviously in terms of implementation, I know people are interested in terms of the cost. So it depends what organization you go for. Like I said, we went for Planview. You will need to get a quotation, but just to give you some idea of the rough estimate of how much these things cost. So the licenses, there was three sorts of licenses, and they range from £50 to £1,300 in terms of the type of access you wanted. The £1,300 was for an administrator, £50 was just for a normal user who couldn't change anything but could view things. In terms of the consulting services, like I said, this was 2 years ago, it was around about £1,500 a day. And the initial implementation, they call it a fast track, takes 12 weeks, but the entire project actually took 12 months. So I was obviously carrying the internal project costs for the 12 months. So that's just to give you some sort of idea. Unlike Network Rail, we didn't go for the big bang approach. This was basically driven due to the lack of appetite for risk and uncertainty and change, as you can imagine you've got in the nuclear industry. So we split the implementation into 3 phases. Although phase 2 and 3 were eventually combined. So once they got the confidence in the system in phase 1, which was to implement the demand, you know, putting new things in the system, the execution and the tracking and the closeout of projects was in phase 1. In phase 2 and 3 was looking at, you know, program and portfolio management and some of the more complex reporting. They actually combined those, or we actually combined those 2 phases as people got used to using the system. Okay, and the training became easier as well, because, you know, they understood the architecture of the system and the tiles, and you know, they was used to the look and feel of it. Okay, so these are kind of indicative costs. There are additional costs if you want additional hosting. For example, if you want to sandbox and stuff like that, there'll be extra costs. Okay, so I've overrun slightly, I do apologize. Eddie, do you want to pick some out?
Okay, there's one of the questions is, were there any challenges associated with classified networks or systems, and can you deploy the PPM tool across multiple networks?
So to answer the first question, was there any challenge? Yes, there was. So we have a department that looks at information security. Because we wanted to host this in the cloud, we didn't want it on premise. I recall going back 4 times with different proposals. Obviously, I had to convince them that the system was secure and that they had all the right certificates for hosting things in the cloud. So yes, it was quite difficult. However, once we got over the initial, yes, you can go ahead and implement this, and we'd satisfied everybody that the security was in place, that should be in place, then it made life a lot easier than if we'd have had it on premise. Because if we'd have put it on premise, then it would have been even more complicated, because, you know, it's like, well, what effect is the additional load going to have on servers and networks, etc., etc., where all you needed to run it was an internet connection. So yes, it was challenging. But what's good over the challenges? It did make life a lot easier having it in the cloud. What was the second part of that question? Sorry.
Whether it can be deployed across multiple networks.
Like I said, as long as you've got an internet connection, yeah, you can access it from anywhere. We do actually have a policy at Sellafield that you cannot access it using your own personal device, and that's because obviously we don't know what level of virus checking, etc., they have on the PCs. So you do actually have to use your Sellafield company laptop to access the even though you're only using the internet and accessing the website. That's a policy. It doesn't actually stop you from using it. So for some of these screenshots, I could have got them from the sandbox quite legitimately because that's not data, but I didn't. I just didn't want to sell a laptop.
Okay, thank you. Next one then. What would be your starting point to sell this approach to a more digitally challenged or less mature organisation?
Right. It depends how digitally challenged they are. So if they're currently using Excel, then and things like Microsoft Project, then they'll probably go through the same pain as we went through, which, all right, the challenge was really with the users and pricing off them Excel, which is really user friendly, and people can set things up quite quickly. If you want to draw a graph, you just highlight some data and press F11. Getting them into a position where everything's in the same place and you're using this, so you've got a single source of the truth, that would be the challenge. If you've got someone who doesn't even have Excel and they don't have people who can do simple, then you are going to struggle. But for ourselves, getting the users on side, for some of the administrators, it was a nice new shiny tool for them to use, and they was quite willing to do it. So we had at least 3 administrators who were really keen to use the system. It was the rest of the users who didn't see the benefit to them, because we was asking them to now put things in the system which was kind of on top of the day job, and it was like, well, why can't I just manage this in Microsoft Project? It's, well, because if you do that, nobody else can see it, only you, and it could be anywhere on the shared drive, and they're not linked together. As soon as you put them all in Planview, all of a sudden everything's linked. So when you start putting resources against activities, you can see how many resources you need for the department because it's there. Yeah, where if it's on individual spreadsheets everywhere, you've not a clue. You can't interrogate all those spreadsheets which are scattered all over the shared drive to get all your information in one place. Okay.
Okay.
I hope that answered the question.
Following on from that, then,
yeah.
There's one around the fact that project managers are not Power BI experts, and therefore tend to put together things that suit them.
Well, this was the nice thing about Planview, because it had 120 reports out the box. We could also, if you had an expert, create more reports, but each of the reports were configurable. So you had filters, so you could filter by things. You had, similarly you do in Microsoft Project, a big long list of things you would want to display as part of that report. So there's often lots of fields you could choose from to make you look and give you what you wanted. So there's no need to be a Power BI expert. But when we was being asked for reports that didn't exist in the system, that's when the challenges come, and we had to start employing people who knew what they were doing. I tried doing it, and like I said, it was difficult, because I was a bit like, well, I'm an SQL programmer. I can do this, and when I tried, it was like, this is not SQL. Don't recognize this, and it was a bit of a challenge. So you will need, but out of the box, there is lots of reports you can use, and they're used by many organizations. They are, it's a world-class product. So if the rest of the world can use these 120 so reports, that there's no reason why you should be able to get by with them. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, do task and project managers have responsibility receiving and managing supplier schedules, or do they have to update the Planview schedule? How does
Right. So that's quite interesting, because you can, we don't, but you could give your suppliers access to the schedule, so you're all using the same schedule, and that's somewhere where I think we should be in the future. The reason we don't do it now is because we're currently in a position where we're changing some of the suppliers. But yeah, you can, in future we could give people, the suppliers, their own access rights, and the access rights were quite good because you could have lots of different types of users. The administrator could create, different user types who then would get access to different pieces of information. So if you wanted progress from your suppliers, you could just give them access to that little bit of data they needed to enter, and they could enter their progress. And you can have text fields on there. So for project managers, we had text fields on there, and you can give them text fields, so you can ask for a commentary about cost, a commentary against quality, a commentary against testing, and other commentaries. And then you can use all that text in different reports. So you saw you could have a single page line report, which is, we use the standard Excel template the line managers used to, the project managers used to fill in on a monthly basis, and we replicated that quite easily in Planview, and we give them fields to type things in. So I hope that answered the question.
And the next one is around how easily is it to transfer existing schedule data into Planview?
Right. So if it's in Microsoft Project, it's extremely easy. If it was in P6, then it was impossible. We originally wanted an interface to do that, and we just couldn't get it to work. However, because we had the schedules in P6 for the major projects, there was no need to put the detail in Planview as well. Hence, you saw them just being represented by one bar. The tasks and other projects, you could also roll those up into one bar, and the report that I showed was a roll up of those. Even though it looked like it was one project, one bar, you could actually drill down into the detail. So if they were minor projects or tasks, they would have, a schedule that looked like any normal schedule with, tens of lines of activities on there, durations, cost, resources, etc.
Okay, the next one then, does the PPM tool provide greater insight into cross-programming project dependencies and effective management of these?
Yeah, so a lot of what I've shown you was from phase 1. In phase 2 and 3, we introduced program management, and again, you probably saw that on one of the first graphics where I showed the architecture of the system, and it's got things like benefits management and all the other stuff you would associate with program management. Not being a program manager, there was a lot of what I could put this terminology they was using, like tranches and things like that. I didn't particularly understand myself, but then the program managers were brought in to help deliver that part of the project and collect the requirements on that. But you can see from the architecture, it does all that good stuff. You have programs and tranches and benefits realization, and it does all that as well.
Okay, and a last question then, do you include financial, IT and people focused projects in the tool?
To include what, sorry? The
financial, IT and people focused projects.
Yes, yeah, so all the projects went in there. There were some projects we didn't actually know what to call them, so they got given some quite amusing names during the implementation, like Amanda's Special Bits, I think we call one of them, because it was it wasn't really a project or a task. It was a pot of money that things were being paid. You used to pay for things, so yes, we could do that, and they was given their own like area within the system, but we could still manage them, and they could still appear on reports and things, but they wouldn't have a schedule, they wouldn't have resources. Basically, it was a pot of money that you could manage to pay for things that need to be paid for. So yes, it's used for everything. In terms of the people stuff, the resourcing bit was quite good as well. That if you wanted to, we didn't put the level of detail in, but what you could do, you could actually put people's skills in there in terms of what they was good at or what their job or role was, and you could actually get Planview to pick who was the best person to manage this project automatically. We didn't actually use that. We thought it was a step too far in terms of automation, and the head of projects, even though I had quite a number of project managers and task managers, he knew all of them individually, and he didn't feel he needed that level of detail. But you could actually load it up with who was good at what in terms of their competencies, and then when you created a new project, you'd say these are the competencies I require, and you'd score each of the project managers on their competency, and it'd actually pick the best person. It would then know if they was available or whether they were just working on another task or project, and it would show you their utilization. And what you could do, you could actually say, well, actually, I'll swap him and put her on it. And so the actual resource management was particularly good as well.
Great. Thanks very much, Stephen, for that.
Okay, I think we're out of time. Right, well, thank you for listening. I hope that was useful.